Best to create an environment in which you could explore these technologies and integrate them into your practice. You could be a mother returning to the workforce after taking care of your family, or someone who wants to transition from one style of work to another. There's no prerequisite. You can come from anywhere.
There we are. So, welcome everybody, and we are going to be having a conversation with some Indigenous matriarchs from Hawaii and talking about futurisms. And we can't go into futurisms with talking about our ancient ties, and I think that just getting chills because it feels like this is such a powerful example of how people with that strong ancient teachings that have gone back through several generations, hundreds of generations, and yet here we are going into the future with our languages being brought back and nurtured, our cultural ties to the ocean, and I couldn't think of two better people to have this conversation with. So before we get going, I would like to introduce these beautiful women. So we have Kari Kehaulani, hope I said that right, is a graduate research assistant at the Laboratory for Advanced Visualization and Applications, otherwise known as LAVA. Love that. So this is at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She is currently pursuing an MS in computer science. Noe's research revolves around identifying the limitations and strengths that virtual, augmented, and mixed reality spaces affords to teaching and experiencing Hawaiian language and culture and knowledge. And her past published works include Kilo Hoku, a virtual reality educational simulation designed to aid users in their study of Hawaiian non-instrumental navigation by allowing them to virtually sail the Hoku Lea. Oh, so exciting. I'm really excited to hear more about the work you're doing, developing an interactive digital mural using Hawaiian language. I'm going to let you talk more about that when we're having our conversations. And I did note that you really love working on illustrations and animation, and that is so exciting to me. I can't wait to hear more. We also have the lovely Candace, and please bear with me. I'm going to do my best to say your beautiful name. Kaleimamoowahinekapu Galla. Kanaka, Hawaii, Filipino are her roots. She's an associate professor of language and literacy education in the Faculty of Education and the Institute for Critical Indigenous Studies, the Faculty of Arts at UBC, University of British Columbia. And you're on the ancestral lands of the Hunkaminam speaking people, the Homathkuyam, and also the Skomish Olt, Olkamea. And your work, I see, really focuses on Hawaiian language, indigenous languages at the intersection of education, revitalization, digital technology, well-being, and traditional cultural practices, policy planning. Wow, amazing. You're just an incredible person bringing such incredible teachings out through your work, and to have that presence here in BC of Indigenous Hawaiian academia. Oh, so great. And I see that you received your MA in Native American Linguistics, a PhD in Language, Reading, and Culture with a specialization in Indigenous Language Education, Revitalization, and Multimedia Technology. Oh, from the University of Arizona. So I'm going to let you talk more about that too when we get going. But before we go ahead, I want to let our viewers know that you get to experience a beautiful ceremonial welcome and ole by these two beautiful women. I'm going to have to spend more time with you, Candace, so I can learn some oles. But I'm going to hand it over to you two now.
E ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e a. E ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e a. E ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e.
Ocean, Crystal, Storms, Scoopmisho, Homeo, Hoicho, Sleotooth, Musqueam, Scoopmish, Crystal, Quashaman, Hoicho, Kemkemalai, and Sata, and Skaka Stormok, Yo and Hot and Squallowing. Tumakutsikutsnachum. Give thanks to the Creator on behalf of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, where I'm from. My ancestral name is Quichtal. My given name is Dennis Joseph. I want to welcome you all to our traditional unceded territories. I'm grateful on behalf of all of our ancestors, all of our children, and a special welcome and thank you, hands up to the Matriarchs, IM4, the Vancouver Film Festival. Thank you for your work, continuing to build bridges and understanding for all people through your medium. I'm grateful and thankful. That was my warrior song that you heard at the beginning. I also have one other song came to me a while back. I'm grateful and thankful to share with you. I was blessed with this song as a young boy, and I really just became the vehicle for this song. This drum tells the story of my ancestral name. It doesn't relate to this, but I really want to thank you, but I want to show you this drum and share this uplifting song. Enjoy the festival, everybody. Thanks for having me. You all be careful now.
Hello, my name is Gillian Siddall. I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of Emily Carr University of Art and Design. I want to start by acknowledging that Emily Carr is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of Emily Carr today, and I'd like to thank the IM4 Lab for extending an invitation to do so. I'd also like to offer my most heartfelt congratulations to the folks at IM4 on the final episode of their extraordinary immersive knowledge transfer webinar series, which was produced in collaboration with the Vancouver International Film Festival. As with all the work IM4 has done since its founding, these online workshops have made an outstanding contribution to the development of resilient and diverse Indigenous voices and communities in the arts, design, media, and tech. It has been a distinct honor for Emily Carr to help support the important work IM4 continues to do toward indigenization of these areas and beyond. Artist, filmmaker, and IM4 founder Loretta Todd, alongside media matriarchs Doreen Manuel, Cease Wyss, and Tracy Kim Bono, have long been leaders in the work of institutional and cultural decolonization. I admire their brilliance, their vision, and their commitment and dedication to building a better and more equitable world. This latest effort from the matriarchs and their incredible team provides yet another example of the crucial work IM4 is doing to empower Indigenous communities to employ cutting-edge technologies in service of improving, strengthening, and diversifying education, cultural production, the arts, and commerce. The Immersive Knowledge Transfer Series has gathered some of today's leading thinkers and creators together to impart invaluable knowledge to participants. The caliber of accomplishment and talent represented by speakers such as Amelia Winger-Bearskin, Nancy Lee, Kite, and Elizabeth Lapensee is nothing short of world-class. Not only are each of the speakers leaders in their fields, their innovative and multifaceted practices point to the future of creative work. We are so pleased at Emily Carr to support this work. As an administrator at a post-secondary educational institution, I believe indigenization, decolonization, and inclusion represent the most important work my colleagues and I can take on, not only in service of creating more inclusive and equitable spaces within the university, but in the interest of transforming the very nature of what an institution is and is capable of accomplishing. The project of prioritizing support for Indigenous and diverse ways of knowing over historically privileged and ultimately oppressive perspectives and narratives is, in my view, the most crucial and indeed necessary contribution toward the project of true social justice that an institution like Emily Carr can make. To paraphrase Brenda Crabtree, director of the Aboriginal Gathering Place and special advisor to the President on Indigenous initiatives, our goal is to infuse Indigenous ways of knowing throughout the university. And while there is amazing support throughout the Emily Carr community with working towards decolonization, there is still much to be done. So thank you, IM4, both for this latest inspirational series and for your ongoing leadership in tirelessly demonstrating the innovative and far-reaching ways this work can take place. It's been an extraordinary privilege for this university to be invited to support your efforts. I look forward to continuing to participate with you in the future. Thank you.
So, welcome back, everybody, and I hope that was a really awesome introduction and setting the tone for today. As I said, we have two beautiful matriarch guests with us, and I'm hoping we can have them both share. I think we can all take our microphones off mute now and and engage in a dialogue together. And so, Kari, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and how you got into this amazing field of work?
Yeah, so I'm Kari. I'm originally from Kauai, but then I moved to Oahu to go and start studying computer science at UH Manoa. I went there for my undergraduates, and while I was there, Jason Lee opened up Lava, which is the lab that I currently work at. And so I worked there as an undergraduate. Then he said, "Hey, you should do a master's." And then I was like, "What's a master's?" I didn't really know what that meant. And then, but continued on, and now I'm working on finishing up my master's degree in computer science, and I'm hoping to continue on to do a PhD.
Wow, amazing. Well, Candace, do you want to share a little bit about what led you into Futurisms?
Aloha mai kākou o wau no o Candace Kaleimamoowahinekapu Galla no Hawaii mai au. First off, I'd like to mahalo IM4, the matriarchs and the staff for the invitation and to be among Kehau as well as UCIS in this last webinar series. I did not grow up speaking Olelo Hawaii, and although I didn't grow up speaking Hawaiian language, I grew up in a Hawaiian culture and dancing hula. So my mom is a kumu hula master, and so I really grew up in that kind of environment, in that household. And so when I was younger, understanding that Hawaiian language wasn't a language that was available at school necessarily, not until I attended Kamehameha schools on the island of Oahu, I was able to formally take classes in Olelo Hawaii. And my parents actually moved away to the mainland while I was at Kamehameha. And while all of my other friends would go back to their family on the outer islands, like we say, the other islands, I would return back to the mainland because that's where my parents resided. And I had this deep yearning to connect back to Hawaiian language, Hawaiian culture. And so when I graduated from Kamehameha schools, I took 6 years of Olelo Hawaii. I wouldn't say that I was proficient in speaking Olelo, but I think it was an opportunity for me to, again, ground myself in Olelo Hawaii. But at that time, when we think of, let's just say the 90s, many of my classmates were enrolled in other classes, in other language classes like French and Spanish and Japanese. And so there were just a handful of us by the time I graduated in Olelo Hawaii. But then I went on to university at University of Arizona, and I kind of forgot necessarily about my language interest. I was interested actually in computer science. That's also a long story. But if we fast forward, I attended the American Indian Language Development Institute. And it was one of the first institutes that brought together language educators and linguists for the purpose of revitalization. And it was at this time that I really found a network of people that really understood what I was trying to regain, my language, culture, and identity, and living away from Hawaii. many Native Hawaiians actually live away from Hawaii, about 50% of our Native population. And so growing up now living away from Hawaii for, I would say, more than half of my life, it's something that has grounded me. And although I've resisted dancing hula when I was younger because I was learning from my mom, I really appreciated the fact that she pushed me. Well, I don't know if that's the correct word, but a gentler word, of encouraging me to again stay true to my culture and my upbringing and continuing that. And so I guess that's just a little bit of how language became a part of my adult life. I try to stay connected as much as possible, and it's difficult, because again, I live away from Hawaii. I'm at an institution that doesn't teach Olelo Hawaii, but I really promote Indigenous languages, Indigenous language revitalization. And so I use kind of the foundation that I grew up with to share with my students some of the successes as well as challenges with just language revitalization in general.
Wow, I feel like you two are a powerhouse duo, even just imagining the two things you do together. And Kari, like, I was really fascinated about your work with Futurisms on the Hokulea. Did I say it right? Yeah. I've just tried to follow different elements from when I heard about it a number of years back to seeing that, it's traveled around the world. And I'm often like fantasizing about ways to get in there and, and be part of that. So I was really excited to hear about your work and how you can help Hawaiians access a digital virtual experience of that. So maybe you could talk about what inspired you to do that and what, just whatever you'd like to share.
Okay. Well, where do I begin? So, Kilohoku, since you mentioned it, Kilohoku is a virtual reality simulation that when I say we, myself, Patrick Cargel, Dean Lotus, and Anna Sicking created for a virtual reality class when we were undergraduates. And that, along with a lot of the other work that I've done or I am working on, comes from this idea of kind of what you mentioned is accessibility, in which that I myself, just like how Candace mentioned, is that I grew up in Hawaii, but I didn't really... I grew up around the culture. I also did hula when I was younger and everything, but it's a really eye-opening experience when you start to have the chance to learn the language. Now, I didn't get to go to Kamehameha school, and so I started learning the language in college, or I was trying to teach myself in high school, and then I got to college and actually was able to have teachers. And I thought, okay, I know a lot of Hawaiian words, but I need to know the rules. I want to be able to speak this. So having that opportunity, I was, along with having this, or also when I was in high school, I actually was going to go and be a TIM major, which is travel industry management, because back then everyone said, hey Kari, you're good at school, do this, you're going to get a nice job, you're probably going to be a manager of a hotel, it's good. But then I actually made a video game in my spare time, and I liked it so much that I'm pretty sure the month before I started UH, I'm like, can I switch to computer science? And immediately enrolled and was able to get into the classes that I need to do, and it just has gone on from there. So, with being able to formally learn Hawaiian, and with the skills that I'm starting to learn when I got an interest in programming and everything, I realized that the ability that you can get from, the ability you can get from making programs is that it can be more accessible to people. So actually there's one project that I think I can start talking about very briefly if we can roll the Leo VR clip, the one with the dog. So this one is a Leo VR. This was created for the Looking Glass. It was also created for another virtual reality class. And basically we have a little dog that lives in the Looking Glass, which is like a little screen that makes it look holographic. There it is right there. And the program is essentially that you talk to Kolohe and you're prompted to say, oh, tell Kolohe to sit down, so enoho, or tell them iki'i, or go fetch this. So it was a program created so that people who were just learning Hawaiian had a tool they could use to practice. Because for me, really came from, I pitched this for the VR class because for me, everyone who is in the tech hall might know I'm a little bit of a nervous person. So when I was practicing Hawaiian, I was a tool for myself because I wanted to be able to practice and just be able to see if I can remember the vocabulary and everything. But also, the initial idea for that project came from when I was visiting my cousins who live in California. So one of my cousins is very young, or she's like 7 or 8 right now. But they used to live in Hawaii, but then they moved to California, and I realized that my littlest cousin is a lot different than my other cousins because she grew up in California. But it was very fun to see that she actually still knows very little Hawaiian because they taught their dog their dog only understands Hawaiian, and so she talks to Lani, their dog, in Hawaiian. I'm like, wow, this is a really cool way that is for her to use the language. But then I thought of it, that would be cool to gamify that and try to figure out a way, because one, it's more I guess you can feel safer around it because it's a dog, you're talking to a dog, it's a lot less intimidating than talking to a person. You can play around with the dog, and so essentially this idea of accessibility, creating games or creating serious games or creating simulations or creating things in which people, especially Hawaiians who live in the diaspora, can experience these things even when they're far away. Now, I'm not going to say that this is better than actually getting to Hawaii, and actually experiencing these things. Like, you can go on Kilohoku, but that doesn't, I'll tell you because I got to go on the Hokule, it does not compare whatsoever. But I feel that why I'm so interested in immersive technology research is that you're able to have at least like a shadow of what they could experience, to both start, if they're not interested, start to get them interested. If they are interested, to expose them in ways in immersion, and have them have presence in these spaces so that they can learn these things, or they can experience these things so that they can better feel comfortable when they finally go, and they can come back to Hawaii, or they can go see if there's a Hawaiian community where they're living, join in, and feel more present in the community and understand things that they may have not been able to because they moved away.
Think about maybe the differences between games and experiential works, because it seems like you're kind of doing a bit of both, which is really cool.
Oh. Games and experiential works. I feel like sometimes they go hand in hand. I think that when you go and you develop an immersive environment, it doesn't technically have to have a game aspect of it, because if you think of the definition of a game, it's usually that you have a puzzle to solve or some goal to reach, and that's usually what you spend your time on, or that's the point of the whole experience. So for a lot of the things that I develop, I don't think any of them meet a true game, but I do like an entertainment game that you think that you may kind of deal, but I do take aspects of theories and design practices of video games for when developing experiences. So for instance, for Leo VR, we can call it a game because it's kind of fun. You can interact with the dog and everything like that, and you can say that the goal is to learn the vocabulary, so there can be levels and everything. But the more important part is to figure out the way to properly teach and have the results that we're looking for. So instead of thinking of, this is level 1, we're going to do this, the people I designed this with, I designed this with students for another VR class. There's Dennis Malik, there's Kurt Nikaitani, and then there's Tristan Polanka. And when we developed this, we spent most of our time trying to figure out how to write our own algorithm for what we call the spaced repetition of the vocabulary. So I think it was Dennis called like adaptive spaced repetition algorithm was what he liked to call it. Dennis is the second language studies student, and he did a lot of the theory behind of how we could get it so that it could also teach. But anyway, so we focus a lot on that and how to fit it naturally so that it's fun, because what this algorithm is kind of like if you ever had a flashcard app and it shows you, okay, here's this. You remember it? Okay, good. Remember it again? Okay, good. And eventually it stops showing to you if you remembered it, but if you don't remember it, it's going to show it to you more often. So trying to rework that so it doesn't feel so much as busy work as when you're just doing a regular flashcard app, and trying to make it a more fun experience is where we took aspects of design, typical game design from.
So cool. Yeah, it's always good to hear people's working process and what brings us to the decisions we make and how we create things. And so, Candace, you jumped into Futurisms kind of like full on. You're just like, I'm here and it's important to me. And maybe you can share some of the inspirations that brought you into that direction and got you introduced to the IM4 lab and all these amazing workshops that I know that you've taken a number of, which is so fantastic. So yeah, maybe you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, I guess, leading up to the workshops, I've always had an interest in technology and language revitalization. And that's really what my research is, looking at how communities are utilizing digital technologies. And that started again with my interest began in school, in graduate school at the American Indian Language Development Institute at the University of Arizona. And so at that time, I was taking a course on computer applications for Native American communities. If we think of the time frame of the mid 2000s, so for us, for Kari, a very young person at that time, but if we think of the technologies that were being introduced, things like, PowerPoint was already out there, but if we think of the transition between overhead transparencies and then PowerPoint slides, for some of us, there was a lot of resistance, hesitation to make that transition. And so I was curious about how, say, the Native Hawaiian community, as well as the communities that were in the surrounding areas, were using technology for language work. So if you fast forward, now that I'm here at UBC, my research has continued, and again, always, continuing to engage and find different ways, different applications, why individuals or communities or languages are being represented in the digital realm. And so for me, I came across IM4 and it was on social media, and I was really excited about it because, again, when I was in grad school, I played a lot of video games, and I think that was a way to, like, a little bit of downtime. I wouldn't consider myself a gamer, but it was something that I was, again, interested in. And at the University of Arizona, for a brief moment, we formed a group called the Native Language Games Initiative. And we really were trying to get people together with different skills and expertise from the community, as well as academic and the gaming community, to come together to see if we could create a game in an Indigenous language that is representative of that particular culture. But we found out, well, I think it kind of dissipated just because there were so many moving parts, and we required so many people. And so that kind of, faded away. But again, the interest was still there. So, with IM4, the first workshop that I attended was the 360 video workshop. And it was really exciting to me because I could see the potential it has, and we were exposed to different videos at that time. And so maybe if you can share a project that I did. Now, this is in no way near what Kari does with her work, and you will see that there are some familiar faces like Cease, Colin from IM4 as well, and Rose Stefarm. So this is just a short 360 video in created last year, I believe, and this was for the international United Nations International Year of Indigenous Languages.
Aloha mai kākou, o wau o Candace Kaleimamoowahinekapu Galla, e Hawaii au. O keia makahiki, ka makahiki kuaina o nā olelo o iwi.
Hello, my name is Rose Stefarm. I'm Anishinaabe and Siksika and Cowichan and Sartlip and Aninan and Dakota. And one of the words I've learned how to say is shti. And shti is like the word for love in Sinshathan.
Chenquamento mi wechakyof, unhash swallowins, unhash swile, choits tanat, queensnas. Choits tanat, queensnas.
O kinape, this student Kanaka natsibita, o kinape sanadapi, iksagapi gastu, spumok.
Let us celebrate our indigenous languages.
And so that was just a short video that we were able to put together. I think it was a 2 or 3 day workshop, and so it was really exciting for me. Again, being very new to XR, if you just want to say that in general. And then that led me to taking other workshops as well. So I'm very grateful for IM4 for offering these workshops, and also allowing me to participate, because I am always aware that I am a guest here, and that the workshops are for First Nations people here in Vancouver, and so I'm always aware of that, and I'm so grateful that I have an opportunity.
I wanna say that it's not just for the local people here, and it's exciting for us that we can diversify within IM4 and involve Indigenous people from around the world. It's really actually a big part of our work is to not leave anybody out. And so it's been very exciting for us to have you come there, and we've had people from everywhere, just all the different cultural groups that have walked through the doors, and then our presenters through this series have been very international present. So yeah, we are also very humbly grateful that you came through the doors and took a chance on us, because I think it can be intimidating, not so much for your generation, Kari, because you're growing up in a generation where digital devices have just been so normalized, right? And I think about my life and how I remember being in my late teens and seeing a computer for the first time and just being like, I don't know if I can ever use that. Yet I had been typing a code without knowing it in school, helping to develop all the exercises we did. Did a lot of the research for people developing computers and how a simple typewriter works, to word processor, to you can shoot and edit and create and stream on just a simple device now. And you used to have a whole room full of things to do those things. Like yourself, Candace, I was just getting into this field when you started. So I also feel like The one also with very little experience, we look at the next generation, and you all are stunning, and you're electrifying with your knowledge and the generosity and kindness of where you want to take your teachings. For yourself, what's your path?
Well, I think I can answer this with what's been on my mind lately is that I've now have a couple of projects under my belt that are pretty interesting, but a lot of them are in what I would call a prototype stage. They still have a lot of work to do. So what I've been thinking of is so I learned how to code things. I learned how to develop environments and that sort of thing. I was able to get my art up to that level. So now I'm thinking of one of the main problems that we face because of all the different teams that I work with to make these projects is that how do we distribute them so that it actually gets to the community? Because all these things are so cool, but if I'm the only one using them, or only everyone who gets to visit Lava use them, I don't think they're actually very useful.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing that I really want to learn and try to expand on is really two things. One, being able to figure out how to disperse these things in a way that is actually helpful for our communities, because there's still the thing of virtual reality headsets, everything like that, or hardware like that especially, is still not very accessible to everyone. It's accessible to like maybe most people on Oahu, but like maybe not the outer islands and maybe not everywhere on Oahu. Sometimes you actually need stable internet and you need to have a headset, which can cost a lot of money depending on like if you had an organization help you attain it, or personally it's a lot of money if you just wanted to buy your own headset. So thinking of ways to figure out how in the community you could have this accessibility to these very interesting mixed realities or augmented realities or virtual realities. And the second thing is just learning how to design better so that it's better for the community. As in, the way that I learned how to program and everything is a very standard programming like tradition. So all of my teachers, they worked at Silicon Valley, or they worked in the Apple or whatever, or IBM. And so design practices for projects, I feel, work for what is considered, how do I say, a standard way of designing. But honestly, I feel like when you work with these projects that are particularly for culture, language, and everything, you have to really rethink the design practices and see like how do you make it so that it's better, both ethically, both does it actually culturally express and transmit the knowledge that you need to do, that they need to learn, or you're hoping that they learn, and you know, that sort of thing. That's what's been on my mind lately, and I hope that now that I have like I'm good at making, like I can make a pretty environment, or I can make that I actually, as I go forward, I really want to learn how to do that so that it actually is impactful for everyone, and not just I keep on saying, look at the cool thing I did.
Exactly. Yeah. It's well, I think that's exciting because you're looking at the ways that your work will be relevant to your people, and I think, you know, it's really important. We create work and we hope it's got a fairly broad audience, but there are some things that really are specifically for a target audience, like the language and cultural elements. People might think there's not enough of our people to access that, but I think there's a lot. They just have the barriers, like you're saying, of not everybody can have a headset, not everybody can get internet. I think internet, it's the same thing in North America. In Canada, there are a lot of Indigenous communities that they don't know what Wi-Fi is. They only have they have dial-up, and only when there's not storms in their areas, right? Like a lot of people living in really rugged community environments, right? And so we can't make assumptions that just because this is something that's that's out there, it's trending around the world, that it's actually available, accessible to the very people we wish it would be.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of our work then becomes, how do we help create that accessibility, right? So I'm really excited to see where your pathways take you, because you went into it very organically, with, you know, people pushing you to do that traditional style of work, like work in the tourism industry, and you're like, yeah, I'm actually going over here now. I just saw this, and that impulse is great, and I want to acknowledge that took a lot of courage probably for you to just say, I'm gonna break this mold that I don't really fit in, and take a chance on what is over here, because, you know, at this point you're one of the trailblazers, right, for your people, and it's kind of scary, but it's also exciting to be able to help begin that journey with your people, and open up those pathways, and then making connections with people like Candace, and you know, between the two of you having these dialogues and building, and other Kanaka Maoris out there that we all want to reach, and we all want to share our stories with, and you, Candace, taking the language elements of what's the most important to you, and taking, you know, you're taking a risk coming into IM4, and what will I do, and how will I understand this? But you went right, flowing through everything, and it's always, for both of you, I just see you both have strong visions of what you want to do already. So with that creative drive and motivation, it opens up doors that are limitless for both of you to keep taking that into those other places. And so Candace, what do you think about where you might take your journey with your next pathways with AR, VR, XR?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, I have lots of ideas. I don't know if it'll come to fruition. But I think, you know, the work that Kari is doing is really amazing, because it offers opportunities, whether it is a diaspora, again, thinking of who your audience is, to engage and experience language and culture. So I think, you know, whatever project that I hope to engage in the future, you know, language will be a central component to that. Of course, I always go back to my hula roots, if you want to call it that, but how to experience hula virtually, you know, with the pandemic that we're all experiencing. Again, there has been maybe some resistance or hesitance to engage with technology for language revitalization or restoration or reclamation. But we've seen communities and language speakers and language learners really taking a hold of technology and finding ways to adapt and really use it to supplement the work that we do. And I think it's really great to see again the work that Kari is doing, the work that you continue to do, Cease, and many of the people that have come through IM4, because it's really inspiring to see so many Indigenous artists, educators, health workers really pushing the boundaries and really showcasing that, you know, Indigenous scholars, artists, community members, language speakers, learners have the capacity to do this, and IM4 is creating that opportunity for us. So when I engage in or think about engaging in projects, again, resulting in technology collaborations, I think of, again, like what you guys just mentioned, who is the audience? Who has access to these technologies? What is the intention or purpose? How does this help to achieve the community goals or maybe the language goals? Maybe what's the cost? And this isn't specific to Hawaii, but when we think of, again, Indigenous language revitalization or restoration, is there community capacity building? And so again, thinking of IM4 is really building that capacity, building those skills for Indigenous peoples. And then really thinking of how does it contribute, again, to reclamation, revitalization, education, and maintenance? How does it empower community? One of the big things that I think of with technology over the last 15 years is, are we creating the same content and material just in a different form? And is that necessary? Is that something that we should be doing? How much money did it take to just kind of repeat that content and material just in a digital form or a different format? And then again, thinking of intellectual property, who owns those rights, the ownership, copyright, and what is the commitment and responsibility throughout the process beyond, say, the launch date? So thinking of ethics and protocols, authentic representation. So these are just some of the questions that I think about when engaging with different projects, or even engaging with Indigenous communities here in BC that I'm forming relationships with, that I'm still getting to know, but questions that I often consider.
Yeah, those are really good questions. I think we all have to consistently stay in check with those questions. So speaking of questions, we've got some questions that have come out. I guess people couldn't wait to ask things. So would like to know, and maybe this is more for Kari, but it could be for you as well. What games, I'm going to actually read it again because it's a longer sentence. What are your main influences and which video games did you play that inspired you to pursue AR, VR? What games, like, were you playing games? I can't even assume that maybe you were a gamer before. But before creating games, what got you inspired to make the games you're making besides the stories?
I think I can answer this particularly for what got me started when I mentioned that when I was in high school I made a game. I'm very into RPGs, so particularly what I found on the internet was there was something called RPG Maker, and I made my own little RPG game with a little character that went around a village and you had to fight a monster, like very that kind of like Legend of Zelda kind of deal. Like actually Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games and right now I'm playing like Animal Crossing New Horizons. So I play a large variety of games, but I think when I go back and I look and I see when trying to design environments and everything like that, I do look at Nintendo a lot just because I like the aesthetic of Nintendo, but at the same time, I can't really say that there's one game that I think that I draw from. It's just that you guys are right. I grew up with technology. I learned how to read by playing Pokemon. Like, I would actually really have to sit and think and really like self-reflect to think of which game really was the root of all of it.
It's like, Well, I'm going to go into the next question. What are the biggest challenges in terms of converging Indigenous futurisms with language resurgence? And what is the most rewarding aspect of the work you're doing? So you can both respond to this.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think some of the challenges, I guess if you're not in the field or maybe have experience or knowledge of Indigenous languages, then it's hard to kind of relate in a way. And so understanding the context of endangered and indigenous languages of the world, how we've come to that point, and why we're fighting so hard to restore our language, and what that means for our health and well-being and our identity. So I think that is one of the challenges, I guess, when you're working, just I think in Indigenous education broadly, when you think of that term, because there isn't this foundational understanding of how we've come to this place. And so there's similar histories, from Hawaii to what has been experienced here, where I currently reside in British Columbia, to the US, the continental US, to Australia and beyond. And so I think once you kind of unravel that and really share that there's, again, parallel histories, similar struggles that we can actually borrow, we can model, we can adapt, we can really learn from each other, learn from how other Indigenous peoples, communities, programs have really engaged with language. And again, so many of us have experienced language in different ways, whether we grew up in language or didn't, or still have this kind of tension with language due to other experiences, like maybe residential schooling. So there's trauma that's involved in it. And so I think there's those kinds of challenges that exist, but I think because of whether it is a Renaissance movement, an uprising of Indigenous peoples, of really going back to learning more about their culture and heritage and language, and it's through language that people are really finding out who they are. And so I think through that, it's just something that is really beautiful about it. And then through that, we can envision in a future that is bright, that is in our language, and it doesn't have to be in a dominant language like English, right? So we can envision our future where our future is healthy and vibrant, practicing our cultural practices, as well as speaking our Indigenous languages.
Yeah, how about you, Kari? Do you have anything to weigh in on that?
I would agree with everything she said. I can. That was like perfectly put to the challenges that you face. I mean, I can only say more so that I've only faced the challenges with Hawaiian, which has its own both. It can be easier sometimes because comparatively to other Indigenous languages, we were able to save a lot. So when it comes to researching and everything like that, there's a lot of content to pull from the new paper and everything when you're trying to figure out how a word was used or anything kind of like that. But overall, the challenge is that there's a lot of trauma behind like relearning our languages, and there's a lot of also just complexities and nuances when it comes to also being from different islands. Like I'm learning what I think maybe it would be called standard Hawaiian, but my family is actually from Ni'ihau, so I'm learning Hawaiian, but I'm not learning the Hawaiian that my great-great-grandmother would have known or anything like that. So there's also that of what, and I also know on the Big Island, they also have used different words for different things as well. So it's also when you're creating, so say I'm creating or developing a program that's supposed to teach Hawaiian, how do you fit all these nuances and all these different perspectives in as well? Because can be dangerous to also make the one thing about like this one program will teach you Hawaiian and not look at the nuances, and they might die out anyway, even though there's this resurgence going on of learning Hawaiian, if that makes sense.
So Kari, you mentioned pursuing a PhD. It's from Tama Julian. They want to know, they're curious about what you might major in and your hopes for its outcome.
Oh, I'm hoping to I'm hoping to continue with computer science.
Yeah.
Because I feel that it's for what I'm doing and what I'm interested in researching. I think that I benefit from extending or continuing my research and continuing my education in that field, but still I take a lot of other classes. Like even when I was an undergraduate, I took computer science, but I also dual majored in animation. Right now, I'm taking Hawaiian classes. Next semester, I'm very excited because I'm taking seminar courses from about Hawaiian cultural classes. So like, I try to mix everything together, but I stay on computer science because I feel like in that field there's not a lot of it as well. So I kind of want to try to see what I can find in that realm of study.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, there's another question. We have one great question asker. Says, what are your focuses when thinking about culture in the programs you create? As Indigenous women in a male they've just added as Indigenous women in a male-dominated area of study, what challenges have you had to overcome and how did you resolve them?
I can answer this in the sense that it definitely in computer science there were times where I'm the only girl in class and it was very lonely. I guess is a good word.
Yeah.
To say. But it really is you just gotta I guess it's what everyone experiences. I think when you're in this situation, it's just that there are going to be people who are bad and they're going to say crazy things to you. But in the end, I feel like you'll always find people who will help you and who share your visions and who will, like I said, help you along. And as long as you keep focus on your goals, I feel like it kind of helps get through those moments of, I don't know, I've heard crazy things. Like, for being a woman, it's just you get the typical of, like, I can't believe you're here, or when you're in projects, they don't think that you have as much knowledge. Like, I worked on group projects where I've honestly had the most experience, but they didn't want to do anything. Like, they literally, like, yeah, anyway.
But I think they're probably intimidated by your ideas and your confidence in your work, and that's a big part of being an Indigenous woman in a field where you might be the only woman and often the only Indigenous woman. So
you just gotta keep going.
Staying strong. Be strong and never dumb yourself down. Always just keep firmly planted in who you are. That's what I believe. Yeah. I think we have those challenges in every aspect of where we go.
Yeah, I can't really offer any new insight, but just like, you got this, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Stay motivated and keep supporting, right? I often use the canoe as the metaphor. Like, if one isn't pulling, you're holding everybody back and you become dead weight. But when you pull and you're all pulling your paddles, pulling your canoe forward, you just, all of a sudden it's hard at the beginning. Then it's like, are we really working? And you're just whizzing through the water, right? So I think there's a lot of strength in that.
And I guess I could add, I don't have experience with programming and things like that, but within the academy, if you think back, or for Kari, who's in university now, but if you think of your experience at universities or colleges and think of whether you actually had an Indigenous professor, and what did they teach, and how many Indigenous professors have you had in your university experience, or just educational experience from K through 12 and then continuing on to post-secondary. So it, like Kari says, it can be lonely, but I also think of, it's definitely challenging at times. Sometimes it's more challenging than not. But I think of those Indigenous scholars that have come before me and thought of the challenges they experienced 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and the path they paved so that I can be here today. So, you know, when I went to school at University of Arizona, when I was getting my doctorate degree, when I enrolled in the program, there wasn't an Indigenous professor in the College of Education. Yet there were so many, I want to say so many, there were about, I would say 10 of us who are Indigenous from across the US and Canada, but there wasn't an Indigenous professor. There were Indigenous professors that were affiliated with education, but you know, we just were looking for kind of that mentorship. And this is not to say that non-Indigenous people cannot be mentors, but sometimes there's just this understanding, underlying understanding. And so I see for many of the students that are going to school, again, like Kari getting her master's degree, it's really exciting. And it's also, you know, it's exciting to see students come back and also be academics as well, because we need that next generation of students to see themselves in their professors too.
Absolutely. Well, it's we're going to wind down now. I first of all really want to put a shout out to Loretta Todd, our wonderful director that has envisioned this amazing program, and then really I see her as this media maven with many projects. She's almost a project, like you could say a PJ, project jockey. I don't know. But she's up there mixing and matching, and she's bringing people together, super conducting. And I think that's, you know, the words that you just shared, Candace, really, I think encompass how we do have to create our own systems of learning and support for people, especially, you know, for people in your generation, Kari, who you're jumping into a brave pool and swimming through some challenging waters. You have to navigate your way through to your stories and building the foundation of the work that speaks about who you are, right? And what your goals and visions are for your future and your people's future. And Candace as well, like you've consistently maneuvered through with language being in the forefront of everything you do, and it has brought you on interesting journeys. And you know, want to really put a shout out to our whole crew at IM4. You know, again, Loretta, thank you for really pushing for this series to happen. Colin and Alana, just keeping everything flowing through COVID and being able to navigate a project that you have to continue to bring people together in dynamic ways, to VIFF and to Ken for really, who's been just incredible in helping us realize this part of the work and bringing these webinars out. And you know, again, like for the staff wrangling these matriarchs, we're a little bit, we're like cats, we're like running in different directions and, you know, doing all kinds of things. We have incredible women, Doreen Manuel and Tracy Kim Bonneau have been working on mega projects. So has Loretta. I'm working on a bunch of projects, but they're not as crazy mega as those women. But I think I have many projects, so I think that makes it probably challenging as well. And just to say that it takes a team to put this webinar series together, and I feel really honored that I got to be in a couple of them, and that I'm finishing this with the two of you. It feels so close to my heart and soul. A lot of my work, especially in the last 10 years, has been really focused in making connections with Kanaka Maoli and with the Hawaiian Islands themselves, because the land is what really informs us and takes us there. And I think on one note that I'd like to put out to both of you, just maybe because I'm a little selfish, but I want to know more about native plants. And I think with the work you do, maybe seeing some teachings and nurturing your language skills and an ability to bring that out to people. It would be really fun to see if maybe you two find ways of incorporating ethnobotany teachings in there and see what happens, because it's so much a part of Hawaiian culture. I know that. And my hands go up to you and I say mahalo, and I also say chenquen mentomi wit. That means really good work. You both do really good work, and it's inspiring and encouraging, and the future is friendly for us. We are Indigenous people are making the future a beautiful place. I can't wait. So I wonder if we have any words from anybody else from IM4, or if this is it. They haven't sent me more messages. We'll see. Oh, one more message. Let's see. Just smiles. Smiles and smiles. Smiles of smiles. And how could you not smile with those beautiful backgrounds, thinking about the shores of Hawaii and the winds and the flowers. I miss Hawaii. Yeah, so we're going to go out to DJ Utra. So I'll leave it in our technicians' hands. And again, thanks to all those faces we don't see in these webinars. I want to say that we can't be out here sharing this amazing stuff with all the amazing work going on behind the lines there. So big chenquen mentomi wit to you guys too. Oicho.